Within the earth, from waters blue, fairies are whispering to me and to you.
Hello there, hello there, hello there, hello there.
I'm Claire Casely, the fairy whisperer. In the air of sylvan nights, we'll find our way by fairy light. Fairies whisper throughout the land. It's time to walk hand in hand. To catch a fairy whisper, you have to listen closely. Listen with me. Hello and welcome to the Fairy Whispering Podcast. I'm your host, Claire Casely. Before I introduce my guest, I need to give a mention that the first episode of my new podcast, What the Fairy, is out now. And this is a sister podcast to Fairy Whispering, which is released monthly and is created in collaboration with my two enchanting co-hosts, Anastasia and Emma. In our first episode, we share the origins of our fascination with fairies, including some of our personal fairy encounters that fired up our curiosity about the world of fairies. Everything in the podcast is original, including the theme music, which Anastasia created. And unlike other folklore podcasts, we bring first-hand experiences and practical tips for connecting with fairies into every episode, making the magic accessible to everyone. So I do hope you'll join us wherever you listen to podcasts. Now on to the guest for my episode. I'm joined this time by Matt Thompson, a historian and dedicated folklore researcher who's based in the picturesque fishing village of Newlyn in Cornwall. Together we'll be exploring the fascinating Newlyn Rosebud Project, a remarkable story rooted in community, courage and legend. The Rosebud PZ87, an iconic vessel, sailed from Newlyn to London in 1937 in a bid to save the village's cherished homes from demolition. This project was founded by Matt's partner, Maryjane. She is a lifelong Newlyn resident and a descendant of the boat's original owners. Matt and I will be delving into the rich folklore of Newlyn, Mousel and Poole. He shares stories of the Piskies, mischievous spirits, ancient customs and curious beliefs that have shaped this unique region. If you are watching or listening on YouTube, please take time to like and subscribe to my Fairy Whispering podcast channel. I'm aiming to get over 1,000 subscriptions so my pod can reach more listeners, and every sub helps. You can follow the podcast on social media at Fairy Whispering Podcast and contact the show clairefairywhisperer@gmail.com. From tales of Piskies encounters and walked charming to the mysterious Devil's Rock and haunted woodlands, join me as we wander with Matt through the Cornish landscape and listen for the whispers of Piskies and all things otherworldly. Let's begin our journey. Thanks for listening.
Hello, Claire. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great to meet you. So what's it like down in Newlyn?
Very sunny. Had some rain this morning, but the weather tends to change quickly here, being by the sea. But looks like we're in for a sunny evening, so I'll probably try and get out and chase the mackerel after this interview.
Oh, wonderful. So you've got your own fishing boat?
Sadly, no, just shore fishing. But this time of year, the mackerel come close in.
Ah, amazing. Would you like to start with the Rosebud Project?
Yes, so the Rosebud is the route that led us to stumble into local folklore research. Briefly speaking, the Rosebud was a herring drifter which was owned by my partner's family. In 1936-37, Penzance Council decided they would like to demolish a lot of houses in Newlyn and Mousel, which is the village down the road from us, under the pretext that they were quote unquote slums. So as you can imagine, vast amounts of people didn't want to have their ancestral homes destroyed. So my partner Maryjane, her family volunteered their fishing boat to carry a paper petition from Newlyn round up the Thames to the Houses of Parliament to give it to the Minister of Health, Sir Kingsley Wood. So they went up there with a crew of 9 with this petition, which was signed by nearly 1,100 local residents, asking that their houses could be spared from this needless demolition. They were all very strict Methodists, but it so happened that on the voyage they took a bottle of water from Maryjane Holywell, which is on the moorland above us, a bottle of water from the River Jordan, a black cat strapped to the mast, and a pair of old shoes which were thrown on the boat as they were leaving, in the manner that people used to throw old shoes at the bride and groom after a wedding.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So for Methodists, that was quite unusual. It's not really, none of those, apart from the Jordan water, none of those things are very Christian, nor particularly Methodist in any case. So we found that really very intriguing, and it led us into looking into some of the wider folklore of Newlyn Mousel and the small village of Poole, which is just above us. So we have a little cluster of villages. Newlyn, which is still an important fishing port. Mousel, which is a small harbour with 1 or 2 fishing boats left, and Poole, which is a farming village above us. So I thought I'd start with Maryjane Well, because I have a couple, well, I've got one interesting anecdote about that, which is from an edition of the Cornishman in 1924. I'm just going to read an excerpt from the article.
Okay, sounds great.
Yes, so there was an old lady in Maryjane who was 83 years of age, who was absolutely positive that the fairies were in the Maryjane Wishing Well, because when she was very young, people thought she was going to die and dipped in the well, and she was cured. Moreover, her father put some money by the side of the well, and when he came the next day, it was gone. So the fairies must have taken it.
Oh, how interesting.
Lovely bit of source material there, and it's paired up with an anecdote from the village of Poole above us.
Okay.
Which we've given quite recently. So this is from a lady called Sue Ellery Hill, who is the daughter of the famous singer Brenda Wootton from Newlyn. So again, I'm just going to read out what she sent me earlier this year, and it's quite similar to the account I've just read. So here we go. When I was a kid, my granddad often took me on the walk from Newlyn to Poole, across the fields. So that's uphill from where we are now. At the end of the lane that comes out at Poole, he always showed me a special stone where the fairies hid their treasure.
Oh, wow.
There was always a few pennies hidden beneath. We would add 1 or 2 and go on our way. I remember exactly where it was and went looking for it a few years back. Sadly, a house has been built where that hedge was, and a new stone hedge in front of the house. However, nothing daunted, I found a loose stone there and slipped a few pennies beneath it. I haven't been back since, but I hope the fairies will have found it by now. And that's Sue Ellery Hill with a memory of her grandfather, Angus Ellery. There's an old source, more recent source of the practice of leaving coins for the fairies in our local area. I have both of those, and just wanted to add that Brenda Wootton had the ability to do what they call wart charming, which I expect you know about.
Yes, fascinating. Well, do you have any information about the wart charming that she did?
Yeah, so she would basically just give the person tuppence or a small amount of money to buy the wart from them, and then it would disappear.
Mm-hmm.
A little anecdote about Brenda Wootton, that was Sue Ellery Hill's mother. So while we're on the topic of Paul, it's also worth mentioning that there is allegedly a Sheila Ngig on the tower at Paul Church.
Oh.
It's very, very weathered. You can sort of see where it is from the road, but if it is true, then it's probably the most southwesterly example of a Sheila Ngig. Not strictly fairy related, but of interest.
Yes, definitely. Well, connected to the landscape and fertility, and which fairies are intertwined with very much. So yeah.
So I'm going to stick with Paul now and the road between Newlyn and Paul, because there's an example in the local folklore about the phenomena of being pisky led.
Great.
I'm going to read an excerpt here from A Weekend at the Land's End by James Halliwell Phillips, and that was published in 1861.
Okay, yeah.
About the road, which is, just a little way up the road from me here. So it goes like this. A clergyman whose veracity is unquestionable. Interesting, of course, that all the vicars believed in fairies as well back then.
Yes.
Yeah. It's great. That many of the inhabitants of Paul to this day believe devoutly that the Piskies control the mists and can, when so disposed, cast a thick veil over the traveller.
Mm.
Sometimes the fairies throw a light before his face that completely dazzles him and leads him backwards and forwards without allowing him to make any progress in his journey. So that's a bit like the will-o'-the-wisp, of course.
Sounds like that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. This is called being ski-laden, and a man lately going from Newlyn to Poole, as straight a country road as can well be imagined, was thus teased by the fairies, and it was not till he thought of turning his coat inside out that he escaped the effects of their influence.
That's interesting.
It happened just up the road from me there, probably up Gorvis Lane, I suspect.
Like you, I'm interested in, pinpointing the exact places where these experiences happened. I'm wondering, was that an encounter with the will-o'-the-wisp, or was he just lost?
It's interesting. It says they control the mist, and the mist is a common feature of the Pisky-led folklore. But you don't normally hear about people being Pisky-led by a light. That's slightly less common, as far as I can tell from the folklore. So it reminds me of the will-o'-the-wisp. And I think in the group we discussed an article I found where somebody had seen a tin light on Tune Hill, which is also quite near to me, and that was supposed to have appeared as a result of being around the mine.
Yes, I've read of a few of those in Devon as well, around mining areas, and I know people to this day who have seen those lights around mines.
So we had a mine called Wheel Betsy on Tune Hill above Newlyn. So as an interesting anecdote, the black magician Alistair Crowley impregnated the daughter of a woman called Phyllis Marion Gotch. Her daughter was called Deirdre Doherty. And they had a son called Alistair Ataturk, who lived at Wheel Betsy for a while. It was Phyllis Gotch, who organised the Voyage of the Rosebud.
Ah.
So that caused, I gather, a little bit of a scandal amongst the Methodists because there was effectively a Satanist lurking in the background of the woman who organised the voyage.
My goodness. So I have a connection to the Methodists via my great-great-grandfather. He was a Methodist minister. So I know, yeah, they were very straight-laced, and I often wonder what he'd think about me doing this podcast about fairies.
Well, I think possibly in years gone by, they were a little bit more open-minded. I mean, from what I've read, the Rosebud crew went to a primitive Methodist chapel, which is the same chapel that our family attends today. So we went to the Centenary Methodist Chapel in Newlyn. Primitive Methodists were a breakaway movement, like a restoration movement. They were more open, from what I've read, to the supernatural.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Methodists originally broke away from the Church of England because they thought they'd got a bit straight-laced and stuffy and kind of dead. But eventually the Methodist movement went the same way. So the primitive Methodists broke off. They said, this isn't alive anymore. And from what I've read, they were a lot more open to the reality of the supernatural than the other branch, the mainstream branch, who were the Wesleyan Methodists.
Okay. Yeah, my great-great-grandfather, he was United Reform.
I see.
So, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I think the two branches got put back together in sometime in the 1930s.
Right.
So technically, at the time of the voyage, primitive Methodist didn't exist, but it was a primitive Methodist church.
Mm.
And at the time, of course, they were all fishermen, so they had the various interesting maritime superstitions, such as you're not supposed to say rabbit on board a boat, for example. So you say, if you need to mention rabbits, you say underground racehound or cliff conger. Interestingly enough.
That's interesting.
And the reason for that was they used to keep rabbits for meat on ships many years ago. But of course, occasionally they would escape and chew bits of rope and rigging. So eventually it just came to be thought that rabbits were bad luck.
Well, that's really fascinating. Yeah.
But there's lots of those little superstitions, such as, you weren't supposed to have a green boat, for example, because green is the colour of land, and you don't want to make contact with the land because you sink.
Yes.
So the maritime superstitions may have played a part in the good luck charms that we discussed earlier, is my theory, coupled with the fact that the primitive Methodists were more open to the supernatural.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's really interesting. And there's a few instances I've read about in Cornwall where rabbits have been seen on the quay, or white rabbits have been seen.
Yes, I know what you mean, yeah. I think sometimes they're supposed to be the devil in disguise as a rabbit or a hare, or along those lines.
Yeah, because of their connection with fairies and witches as well.
That's right, yeah. I have found a song called Poole Church Town, which is about the Piskies associated with Poole. And I just wanted to read out verse 2, which is in some ways quite amusing. There's 4 verses, but I'll just read verse 2. Keep right up the hill, sir, but walk with a will, sir, lest night should overtake you near Poole Church Town. For such folks as you, sir, may hap this to rue, sir, where pixies in plenty and small folks brown may lead you astray, sir, may deceive you till day, sir, so beware of the Piskies near Poole Church Town. So that's a very nice little song which I found. I'm not sure what the tune is, but it's a warning that you don't want to get caught out at night on the way up to Poole.
Yeah, and referring to them as dressed in brown.
Yeah, small folks brown, which is interesting because it reminds you of the house brownies, although presumably they were outdoors.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about, the the connection with brownies, although there weren't brownies in the southwest. It was kind of a foreign import, wasn't it?
Yeah, although there is reference to a brownie being seen in Penzance, which is one over us the other way. So a man, a friend, I'm testing my memory now, a friend of the town clerk had seen a brownie sitting in a rocking chair in front of the fire, the extent of the anecdote. But the dress aspect is interesting. And I have an excerpt here from Traditions and Hearthside Stories of West Cornwall by William Bottrell, the second series. This is from Mousehole down the road. So this is of interest because it's about coastal fairies. So I'm just going to read that excerpt as well. Belief in fairies is far from being extinct in Cornwall, though our country folks never call them by that name. A few days since, a woman of Mousehole told me that not long ago, troops of small people, no more than 1.5 feet high, used, on moonlit nights, to come out of a hole in the cliff, opening onto the beach on the Newlyn side of the village and a short distance from it. The little people were always dressed very smart, and if anyone came near them, they would scamper away into the hole. Mothers often told their children that if they went under the cliff by night, the small people would carry them away into Dick Dangy's Holt, otherwise known as Dick Daniel's Hole in other sources. And so that's quite a rich little source there, because it has the abduction element in it, and it has the example of the trooping fairies as opposed to the solitary fairies.
Yeah, I love William Bottrell's stories. They're so rich, aren't they? And
Yeah, lovely.
yeah, he was just, you could tell he was so passionate about the Cornish landscape
Yes.
and preserving the stories. Yeah.
So this is another place where you can actually walk to the location. Dick Dangy's Hole is covered up by an inclined concrete wall and a walkway. But there was at one point a cave out there. There's actually 2 holes called Dickie Daniel's Hole. So I made some inquiries with members of the Brockman family, and their view was that Dickie Daniel was a smuggler.
Oh, right.
We had thought that he was going to be some sort of underground troll, goblin sort of thing. Apparently he was a smuggler, and that makes sense, because if he was some sort of supernatural entity, you'd expect him to have one hole, so to speak. But in fact, 2 holes, and if he was a smuggler, he would want more than one place to hide his liquor or whatever it was he was smuggling.
Yes. That's, yeah, I mean, similar here in Devon. There's a few holes and tunnels that smugglers used. Yeah, and I also heard that Dick was another name for the devil as well.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
How interesting. Well, I suppose he was called Old Nick, wasn't he? Perhaps Old Dick was another one.
Yeah.
How interesting. Well, since we're on the subject of the devil, I'd like to mention Devil's Rock, which is just on the edge of Newlyn, between Newlyn and Alverton, on the Penzance side. So it's a little rocky outcrop on the top of Newlyn Coombe, which is the valley where the Newlyn River runs down. And when you go on this rock, it's covered in crisscross patterns. And the basic story is that the devil one day stole the fishermen's nets and ran off with it. He was pursued by the choir of Paul Church. So they chased him singing hymns and chanting the Apostles' Creed. So he ran and he ran and he ran up the side of Newlyn Coombe. And when he got there, he found that he couldn't shake them off. So he jumped over to the other side and dropped the nets, where they turned into stone. And then he flew off into the air, flapping his wings and blowing smoke.
That's a brilliant image.
Lovely story. And it's another place you can visit quite easily. So you have the devil's nets on the rock, but you have some other features, the devil's footprint, which you can see. And the reason why there is a footprint there is because that is the point from which the devil is supposed to have one day jumped off carrying a miller who had been mixing his flour with china clay.
Oh.
So there's warning there for dodgy bakers about what will happen if you mix your flour with china clay. And
that is wonderful.
there's also the devil's frying pan. I can't find the story connected with that, and I can't find the marking either. But it is listed, and one day I expect I shall find out where it is and what it is. More interestingly, there's a feature on the lower side of the rock called the Devil's Chair, which is where he used to sit and listen to everything going on, which is quite fascinating. The rock is quite overgrown, and I have tried to climb it to find the chair, perhaps foolishly. There is actually one story from 1937 about a woman, and she told the story of Devil's Rock to 3 boys, but she told it in such detail that she ended up having an encounter with the devil in her dream that night, and she ended up being bedbound for 3 days with the shock.
Oh my gosh.
A little case of be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, that idea of talking about spirits, fairies, ghosts, the devil can draw them closer to you.
Yes, so she had a very shocking dream, and when I read that, it reminded me of an experience that I had.
Oh, right. Okay.
When I started exploring an area of woodland just down the road from me, which is known as Henley Woods or the Quarry Woods. So it used to be very popular with the local children. They had rope swings there, and one day it was bought privately, and it was kind of left and overgrew. So I started exploring it some years ago, and I found it very, very, very creepy, to the extent that I often couldn't stay in the woods, and I had to leave. And one day, after I'd been to bed, I had a dream that I was walking into these woods, and suddenly I had an encounter with what I presumed to be a demon who was angry with me for going in the wood.
Oh.
In the dream, I thought kami, because I'd been reading about the Japanese religion of Shinto and their nature spirits. I had this really horrifying dream in which this entity that lived in the woods was angry with me for going in there.
Gosh.
And it reminded me of the anecdote with this woman I just said about. And obviously, these things, they could just be psychological, but they also give us a look back in time to the way that people felt in periods of history where the supernatural wasn't questioned. So
yes,
they are valuable experiences, even if you don't think that they are paranormal.
Yes, definitely.
I went cold sweat, and I haven't really been in there much since.
Has the woodland got a reputation locally?
No, not that I can find. The only thing I would say, it has a slightly sad atmosphere because it's got all the abandoned rope swings which have rotted away. At one time, there was a large net strung out in the trees, and the children would go on the rope swing and kind of jump off into it. So it has a slightly abandoned feel about it because the children don't play in there anymore. But that's really the only information I could find.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps, I'm not going to speculate, but sometimes, woodlands are used for all sorts of things, aren't they? And sometimes if there are people that are using woodland spaces for nefarious purposes, then...
Possibly. My stepson just the other day was walking up to Paul, and he looked over into a field, and there was a load of people stood around the field dressed in white robes doing something strange. We never found out what it was.
Okay, yeah. So there could be some kind of witchcraft or, yeah.
Very common down here.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
But, I just haven't really been in because it's quite creepy and I've already explored it. But on the note of creepiness, there's another excerpt from The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries by Walter Evans Wentz, which you will know, of course,
Yes.
concerning the nature of Piskies above Newlyn, which I'm going to read.
Okay.
So he says, the country Piskies, or well, he says Pixies here, but that's the Devon version. The country Pixies inhabiting the highlands from above Newlyn on to St. Just were considered a wicked sort. Their great ambition was to change their own offspring for human children, and the true child could only be got back by laying a four-leaf clover on the changeling.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So that ties back to the Piskies of Paul, because they would trick you and were sort of considered to be relatively unpleasant. And there's a further anecdote from a Mr. Richard Harry of Mousel. And he said, if the fairies are interfered with too much, they are said to exhibit almost fiendish powers. So those two anecdotes go quite well together because it shows that people were afraid of these spirits back in the day.
Yeah, they were, weren't they? I mean, there's all these different forms of protection.
Right, yeah.
Protection of the house or things that you carry with you to protect yourself from fairies.
Yeah, so I think the horseshoe on the door were quite common.
Yes.
Yeah, horseshoe and horseshoe or a crucifix, I think, was how they did it. So returning to the upper outside edge of Newlyn, I just wanted to mention Bucca the Storm God, who is sometimes classified in with the fairies and sometimes not. But Bucca was listed as either a storm god or a sea god, and the fishermen would give him offerings of fish. And they did this either on the beach or at a place called Penza House in Newlyn. If you're driving into Newlyn from Penzance and you look up the hillside, you'll see a house with a bright blue wall. And at that place, in years gone by, there was a very large hawthorn tree with two boulders either side. And that was the location where they used to leave offerings of fish. But the most interesting aspect is the fact that the hawthorn tree was Bucca's sacred tree. And there was a taboo against cutting it down, just like the Irish fairy trees. Penalty was supposed to be that whoever cut it down would be turned into a monkey.
Really? Oh, gosh.
So it's not abundantly clear why the storm god lived in this tree. But we can then think back to my first anecdote about the fairies at Paul controlling the mist. So there may be a link there between the weather. There was a saying years ago, Boney or Bucca will get you, which was said to naughty children. And Boney referred to Napoleon Bonaparte because they feared being invaded by the French in years gone by. So they said, Boney or Bucca will get you if you're out too late.
I've not heard that before. That's really, fascinating.
Yeah. Well, it's fairly obscure, but it is. I have found it in the newspaper archives. So from that location, going up the road, there was a cross base, which was a kind of a way marker or a rest stop for Paul Church. On Good Friday, the local girls would take their dolls up to this cross base and they would baptize the dolls and they would throw their pin in to make a wish. So if you go up to bottom of Gorvus Estate in Newlyn, on your left, there's a house and the name on the gate is Pinwell Field, because that was the field where the pinwell was. So it's a nice little custom, and there is somewhere, there's a little bit of video footage on YouTube.
Does the well still exist?
It it's in someone's garden up on the top road. So it was a cross base. The cross has since gone. So they used the hollow of the cross as a makeshift well because we don't have a holy well in Newlyn. So the nearest one really is Maryjane, which is just about in walking distance, but it's up on the moorland up behind us a few miles. So yeah, Good Friday, they would baptise their dolls. But up near Maryjane, there is a well at the source of the Newlyn River, and it's called the Well of the Little People. And they would have the same custom there on Good Friday. They would take their dolls up to that well and be baptised. So it kind of happened at both ends of the Newlyn River, which is interesting on Good Friday.
That's not the same Maryjane well that you mentioned earlier.
It is.
Okay, so that was called the Well of the Little People.
Sorry, no, they are two separate places. There's two wells up there. One is the source of the Newlyn River, and another one is near an old church and baptistry. So they're both in Maryjane, but there's a couple of wells up there on the moorland.
Ah, that's interesting. I've not heard of the Well of the Little People.
Yes, it's quite hard to find. It's usually quite overgrown, but if you go on the Cornish Ancient Sites Protection Network group on Facebook, you can go on there and see the photographs of it.
Oh, brilliant.
So, yes, interesting double custom there at both ends of the river.
Yeah, at the source and, yeah, where it's...
And, yeah, at the other end.
The other end.
I've never seen cross base. It's in someone's garden somewhere, but that's at the bottom of Gorvis Road, which goes up to Poole. And a little bit further up there, the cross base hidden in the hedge somewhere, which was another rest stop, which I need to try and find at some point. It is recorded, but it's usually overgrown. It's been kind of set into the hedge.
Yeah, because the custom with the dolls in Devon, young women and girls would take their dolls on May Day. They dress dolls with flowers and put them in boxes and take them round to people's houses and collect pennies for the dolls.
Ah, right. How interesting.
So, yeah, that's a May Day custom.
Oh, right. How lovely. I've not heard of that. Interesting. Just returning to the theme of brownies, there's something in my notes here which has prompted my memory of that. So this is from Mrs. Jane Tregertha of Newlyn. And she said, whenever anything went wrong in the kitchen at night, the Piskies were blamed. After the 31st of October or Halloween, the blackberries were not fit to eat, for the Piskies had been over them. And the other saying was, the devil has sat on them. Or another word which rhymes with sat, but which I won't say on your podcast.
Yes, there's various versions, aren't there, about, yeah, the interpretation of the Piskies going over them.
Yeah, she said the Piskies would be blamed if anything went wrong in the kitchen at night. So that's quite an interesting one, because it sounds like the brownie that has transformed into a boggart when it's been annoyed. So yeah, that's quite a good one. Going back to Newlyn Combe, the valley, Walter Evans Wentz recorded another incident about. Well, I'll read the anecdotes. I used to hear about a Zenner girl who came to Newlyn as a nurse to the child of a gentleman living at Zimmerman Cot, short for cottage. The gentleman warned her never to touch a box of ointment which he guarded in a special room, nor even to enter that room. But one day, in his absence, she entered the room and took some of the ointment. Suspecting the qualities of the ointment, she put it to her eyes with the wish that she might see where her master was. She immediately found herself in the higher part of the orchard among the pixies, where they were having much junketing, e.g. festivity and dancing. So that's an interesting one, because the ointment and the theme of eyes comes up quite a lot in folklore. And sometimes read about people having their eyes being hit or punched so that they can't see the fairies anymore. Now, the orchard doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, but Zimmerman's cottage is still there in the Coombe. So it's another place that you could visit in theory. But I did find the orchard on a tithe map from 1841, reference to it being damaged in a storm in 1862. So I'm not quite sure when the incident would have taken place, because it seems to have been around for a long time. But the place itself does exist, which is nice. There used to be lots of orchards in Newlyn Coombe, but it was subject to having very big floods. So very fertile, but also prone to flooding.
Sounds a very liminal place then, because, with the water and the apple trees.
Yeah, so the orchard, for context, is sort of down below Devil's Rock. And then it's just below a place called the Bluebell Dell. And we do have one account there of a quote-unquote bogeyman who would catch the children if they stayed out too late. Not much detail on that, unfortunately, but someone did give us that little anecdote.
Fascinating.
Yes, it's nice. It's a fairly small area, but it's small enough you can go for a long walk around and you can visit all the sites of where these stories took place. So we sometimes like to do that when we go blackberry picking in the autumn. We go on a huge long walk around and we visit all the sites where these incidents have taken place.
Oh, that's really nice.
Going back to the subject of coins briefly, I just wanted to mention down at St. Loy's Woods down the coast from us, there's an example of one of the trees where people put coins into the cracks to make a wish.
Oh, great. Yeah, a money tree.
St. Loy is kind of 3 coasts down from us. So it goes Newlyn, Maryjane, Lamorna, and then St. Loy. And in St. Loy's Woods, there's a tree, and it's a dead tree, and it's full of coins people have left there. There was at one point a holy well at St. Loy, but it was destroyed by a farmer trying to make room for his crops. So I don't know if there was ever a coin wishing tree there historically, but it's another very nice little place with a little bit of folklore attached. But I can't find any historical evidence for a wishing tree there, but there is one today which we like to visit.
In Devon, we've got Lidford Gorge. That's got some wishing trees in it. And Becky Falls has got some wishing trees as well. So in Devon, they tend to be near waterfalls, rivers.
Oh, yeah. I see. Well, there is a sort of a waterfall there. It's just that it's a very steep river. But yes, it's a very nice place. It's more common down here to have the clouties.
Right, yes.
So, I expect you know what they are, but just for anyone listening, they're strips of cloth that you hang up, generally to wish or to relieve yourself as an illness as they decompose. So if you go to Maryjane Well, or another well-known one is Sancreed Holy Well, there are lots and lots of little rags tied up on the trees around those wells.
Yes, to honour the spirit of the place or the fairies.
Yeah. So coins are less common, but clouties more so. My assumption is years ago material was more expensive than it was now, so a strip of cloth was probably more of a sacrifice than we think of it being now. That would be my guess. It was more costly than we think of it. We don't think of rags as being expensive.
No, and that's why they gave pins, wasn't it? Because they were cheap.
That's right, yeah. So one interesting aspect to the Voyage of the Rosebud was that they kept the bottle of Maryjane well water in the bow of the boat, and they used that to raise money for the Newlyn Aversion of Hardship Fund by giving people a tour of the boat inside. And when they got into the bow, they had the chance to make a wish using Maryjane well water. And my assumption is that they probably had pins which they dropped into the bottle because nothing else would have fitted. So they used that to raise money for the community effectively. And one of the visitors, again, was a vicar who made a wish. Yeah, so I think probably vicars were more open-minded back then, possibly.
Yes, it does fascinate me the amount of vicars that were interested in fairies.
Yes, well, Robert Kirk was the most famous example, but I think there's probably been a lot over the years, and I think it was C.S. Lewis who said that fairies perform the function of softening the severe edges of the grand design. Well, his view was that fairies have a sort of a theological function of maintaining mystery in creation, because we can't really comprehend them or study them, unlike animals and people and rocks and minerals. That was C.S. Lewis. So that's an interesting way of integrating fairies into Christian cosmology. He was very interested in fairy tales, but I gather that was his view of how fairies could be fitted into a Christian worldview. And the church father Origen, from what I remember, he also believed in fairies or nature spirits that kind of worked to keep the vegetation healthy, and that's the root of the view that theosophists held to do with the flower fairies and that sort of thing. And he held the opposite side view that plant diseases were caused by evil spirits.
Yes.
So my partner's great-grandfather, Jimmy, when it was Halloween, he used to carve jack-o'-lanterns out of turnips, and he used to put them up in the orchard, which was just up behind us in days gone by, in order to protect the orchard from evil spirits, despite being a Methodist. So, arguably, all of these things can fit into a Christian worldview. I think you probably find it more in Irish Catholicism, where it's all kind of intertwined together relatively well. But I suspect the same thing may have been true down here to some extent.
I suppose as well, with the landscape in Cornwall, the beliefs were just difficult to escape, weren't they? You'd just be immersed in that belief system.
Yes. I don't think they really could have been erased. So, I suspect there was a certain amount of syncretism with the fairy faith and possibly Methodism or maybe Anglicanism. I imagine it probably wasn't discussed. I mean, I think as far as I can tell, Christianity has always functioned in this country as the public religion, and paganism has functioned as a private religion, which you might or might not do alongside in secret. Hence the green men hidden away on the walls and the shield and the gigs and the gargoyles. Old-fashioned view. I don't think all folklorists hold that view now, but I suspect it's probably true, to be honest.
And going back to the jack-o'-lanterns made from turnips, I remember my grandfather carving lanterns from turnips when I was a child, because we didn't have pumpkins when I was growing up in the 70s.
No, that's right. They were sort of an expensive item, weren't they?
Yeah, I don't think I saw a pumpkin until, well, maybe the last sort of 20 years. There's been more.
Yeah, it's pretty recent, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is quite good fun carving the turnip lanterns.
Yeah, and they smell really nice, don't they, when they start to heat up?
Yeah, Maryjane used to have a rope handle and then matchsticks to form the teeth. So they would, after he died in sometime in the 70s, but the family carried on doing it in his memory, so she did it as a child. One of her distant ancestors was Irish, and that was on Jimmy's side, so there may have been a little thread of Irish customs there which came down to the family.
Yes, possibly.
I always wondered if that might have explained the black cat on the Rosebud, because there is such a thing as the lucky black bog cat in Ireland, which I researched a while ago.
Was that a dead black cat?
Yeah, no, it was a toy black cat, and it lives at the Penley Museum in Penzance.
Okay.
It's on long-term loan, so anyone who happens to be in Penzance, if they're listening, they can go and see it at Penley House.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, well, if you come down, give us a shout and we'll go for a walk around all the locations.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah, there's a great big huge circular walk you can do, and it takes you around all the places.
Oh my goodness.
All the folklore here is so hemmed in, you can kind of walk around a bit here, and it doesn't take too long.
Thank you for your time this evening, Matt. It's been so interesting. Where can people find out about your project with the Rosebud?
Just on Facebook, we are the Rosebud PZ87 Memorial Project on Facebook. We post various historical and other things there quite regularly.
Okay. Well, I'll add the link to that to this episode when it comes out.
Thank you very much.
Great speaking, and have a wonderful evening. Let's catch up again soon.
Thank you. You too. Yes, speak soon. Bye.
Thank you to Matt for sharing his stories with us. For more information about the places Matt mentioned in the interview, you can have a look at the show notes on thefairywhispering.com. To contact the podcast, you can email me clairefairywhisperer@gmail.com, and remember to subscribe or follow wherever you listen to the podcast. Thank you for listening, and see you next time on the Fairy Whispering Podcast. Bye for now.